Archaeologists have been asking the wrong question about Baalbek for 2 centuries. They have been obsessing over how the ancients quarried and transported the world's largest stone blocks, some weighing 1,600 tons. But in 2026, Grok AI analyzed a bombshell academic study that reframed everything. What if they never quarried them at all? What if those impossible megalithic stones were cast in place using a concrete-like material poured directly onto the temple foundation and left to harden? If true, it solves the transportation mystery instantly, but it raises something far darker. It means someone possessed advanced material science technology in deep antiquity, and the historical record has no explanation for how or why. The implications are not comfortable. They are not welcome in academic circles. They force a complete reassessment of what ancient civilizations were capable of achieving. Baalbek sits in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, roughly 65 kilometers northeast of Beirut. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site now, but for most of human history it was a symbol of something that archaeology could not explain. The site itself contains the largest cut stone blocks ever worked by human hands. Not the pyramids of Egypt, not the temples of Rome, not any of the monuments we have been taught to revere as the pinnacle of ancient engineering. Baalbek surpasses them all. The 3 stones known as the Trilithon form the western foundation wall of the Temple of Jupiter. Each one measures just under 20 meters in length. Each one stands over 4 meters high. Each one extends nearly 4 meters deep into the foundation, and each one weighs approximately 800 tons. That is the combined weight of 250 African elephants. That is the weight of a fully loaded jumbo jet sitting on a single stone slab. 3 of them, stacked horizontally, fitted together so precisely that a sheet of paper cannot slip between them. They are positioned approximately 7 meters above ground level, which means that whoever built this foundation had to raise 800-ton blocks to that height and maintain perfect alignment while doing so. Below the Trilithon lies another layer of the podium. 24 additional stones support the 3 giants above. These stones range from 300 to 600 tons each. The entire platform was constructed at an elevation of 1,150 meters above sea level, in a region surrounded by rugged mountain terrain. The quarry from which these blocks were supposedly extracted lies 800 meters away from the temple complex. To move a single 800-ton stone across 800 meters of ancient terrain, on a landscape with slopes and rises and obstacles, defies every principle of Roman engineering we understand, every single one. Consider the practical reality of moving such weight. An 800-ton stone cannot be rolled on wooden logs without the logs shattering. The pressure point would exceed the tensile strength of wood. The stone cannot be dragged on wooden sledges without the sledges disintegrating under the load. The friction would be immense. The resistance would require thousands of workers pulling in coordinated fashion, and the physics of coordinated pulling at this scale means the force would not be distributed evenly. Parts of the sledge would break. The stone would become unstable. It would tip. It would crack. Yet the Baalbek stones show no signs of damage. They are intact. They are precise. They are undamaged. Mainstream archaeology has never provided a satisfactory explanation. In 1977, French archaeologist Jean-Pierre Adam proposed a method using capstans and pulley systems with hundreds of workers, potentially requiring over 500 men to move a stone weighing 550 tons. He cited examples from much later European history where similar stones were moved using Renaissance technology, but his theory has never been experimentally validated. No one has ever successfully replicated the movement of an 800-ton block across 900 meters of uphill terrain using only wooden rollers, levers, and human muscle. Not once. Not even close. The energy expenditure alone would be staggering. The organizational coordination required would exceed anything we have evidence for in the ancient world, and the time investment would be prohibitive. Moving 3 blocks of 800 tons each would consume months, perhaps years of continuous effort. Some theorists proposed that the quarry was higher than the temple complex, allowing gravity to assist in moving the stones downhill. This solution, while theoretically simpler, still fails to account for the precision placement and the intact condition of the blocks. The impact would destroy the precision cuts. The mathematics simply do not work. The stones would suffer visible damage that we do not observe. This theory, like the others, crumbles under scrutiny. By the early 2000s, archaeologists had constructed an entire narrative to explain Baalbek. The Romans built it, they said. The Temple of Jupiter dates to the 1st and 2nd centuries after Christ. The Romans possessed the necessary engineering knowledge. The Romans had the manpower. The Romans had the organizational structure to accomplish such monumental feats. Case closed. Baalbek was Roman. The mystery was solved, except it was not solved. It was buried under the weight of institutional certainty. The real questions were abandoned because they made nobody comfortable. They opened doors that mainstream archaeology did not want opened. Why would the Romans construct a temple in a town so far from the capital, so distant from the centers of Roman power, using engineering techniques that surpassed anything they achieved anywhere else in their entire empire? Rome built the Colosseum using stones that weighed 53 tons at most. Rome built the Pantheon with technical brilliance and grandeur, yet every block pales compared to the Baalbek foundation. Rome built everywhere they conquered, but nowhere did they ever attempt anything approaching this scale. Nowhere. Not in Africa, not in Asia, not in Europe, only in Baalbek, only on this obscure hilltop in the Bekaa Valley. This inconsistency should have troubled every archaeologist who studied the site. Instead, it was rationalized away. Strategic importance, they said. Religious significance, the prominence of the Jupiter cult in the region. But these explanations ring hollow when you consider the massive disparity between Baalbek and every other Roman construction. And there is another problem that archaeology has never adequately addressed. In the quarry, adjacent to the temple site, 3 massive stone blocks still remain completely extracted from the bedrock, fully shaped, ready for transport. They never moved. They were completed. They were finished. They were positioned for removal. And then something stopped. The stone of the pregnant woman weighs 1,000 tons. The stone of the south weighs 1,242 tons. The forgotten stone, discovered in 2014 by German and Lebanese archaeologists, weighs approximately 1,650 tons. It is the largest precisely cut stone block in the world. It measures 19.6 meters in length, 6 meters in width, and 5.5 meters in depth. It was discovered buried under multiple meters of sediment, already complete, already finished, already waiting to be moved somewhere it never went. The existence of these 3 blocks creates a logical paradox for the Roman attribution theory. If the Romans possessed the engineering capability to move 800-ton stones, why did they leave these 3 stones in the quarry? Why would they quarry a 1,600-ton block and then simply abandon it? Why would they invest the labor to extract, shape, and finish these stones, only to leave them where they were cut? The investment alone would be staggering. You do not commit resources to extract and finish a 1,600-ton block without purpose. You do not complete a project of that magnitude without intention. The standard archaeological explanation is that the project was canceled. The Romans ran out of money, or political circumstances changed, or the workforce was redirected elsewhere. These are convenient answers that explain nothing. They are narrative placeholders. They are ways of saying we do not know without admitting that the entire Roman attribution story is fragile. Graham Hancock, the author and explorer, visited Baalbek in the 1990s and offered a different interpretation. He noted that the quarry stones were never broken up into smaller blocks and reused elsewhere on the temple complex. If the Romans had truly abandoned the project, they would have salvaged the stone. They would have cut the massive blocks into smaller pieces and incorporated them into the construction above. They would have broken them into manageable chunks and used the material elsewhere. But they did not. The stones remain in the quarry exactly as they were finished, untouched, unused, forgotten. Hancock proposed that the Romans never even knew the quarry stones existed. They had been buried under meters of sediment for thousands of years, hidden completely from view. The earthquakes and geological processes that shaped the landscape over millennia had covered them. When the Romans arrived and decided to build a temple, they used the pre-existing megalithic platform that was already visible on the hillside, a platform so ancient and so massive that it appeared to be a gift from the gods themselves, a sacred foundation upon which they could build their own monument. This interpretation shifts everything. It suggests that Baalbek is not Roman, the temple above is Roman, the foundation beneath is something else entirely, something ancient beyond reckoning. Something constructed using methods that nobody in the Roman era fully understood. The Romans simply built on top of what they found. They incorporated the megalithic platform into their design. They built a temple of their own era upon a foundation that predated them by centuries or millennia. If this is true, then the puzzle becomes different. It becomes a question not of Roman engineering, but of pre-Roman capability. It becomes a question of who possessed the knowledge and the resources to cast or construct megalithic blocks of this magnitude in the ancient world. In April 2026, the Russian scientist R. V. Lapshin published a study titled Analysis, Presumed Structure, Method, and Time of Fabrication of the Baalbek Trilithon and Tired Parallelepipes. This paper presents evidence that reframes the entire Baalbek mystery. Lapshin's research argues that the megalithic stones at Baalbek were not quarried as monoliths and then transported. Instead, they were cast in place using a concrete-like material. During the casting process, smaller stone blocks were used as rigid internal filler, providing structural integrity and reducing the amount of concrete material required. The massive blocks were essentially built on site, constructed where they stand now, poured and hardened in their final positions. The formwork would have been removed after the concrete cured, leaving the monolithic appearance that we observe today. If this is true, the entire logistics problem dissolves. You do not need to move a 1,600-ton stone if you build it where it needs to be. You do not need massive cranes or rollers or capstans. You do not need 500 workers straining for weeks on transportation corridors. You pour the concrete into prepared formwork. You embed your filler stones, you allow the material to cure slowly and completely, and you have a block in its final position without any transportation whatsoever. The precision fits between the blocks become understandable and even inevitable. You achieve precision through formwork design. You control dimensions through the molds themselves. You create perfectly fitted blocks by casting them to fit against each other. The gaps between stones could be as small as desired because the concrete forms to specification. The workers do not need to drag stones across terrain. They need to build formwork and manage the casting process. Problem solved. The mystery that has plagued archaeology for 150 years collapses the moment you accept that these were not quarried monoliths but constructed megaliths, built where they stand, cured in place, finished and complete. But this solution creates a far more troubling mystery. Concrete technology requires specialized knowledge. It requires understanding the chemistry of limestone and volcanic ash. It requires knowing how to achieve precise ratios of materials that produce durable, waterproof concrete capable of supporting enormous weights for thousands of years. It requires scientific knowledge about material properties, compression strength, aggregate size, binder chemistry. The Romans possessed this knowledge. Roman concrete, called opus cementicum, was one of their greatest technological achievements. They built structures using concrete that have survived 2,000 years. The Pantheon's dome, still standing after nearly 2 millennia, is testament to Roman mastery of concrete chemistry. They understood aggregate size, binder ratios, curing times, waterproofing techniques, thermal management. They were concrete engineers of the highest caliber. But the Romans did not invent concrete technology. The evidence suggests they inherited it, adapted it, developed it further. Their concrete knowledge came from somewhere. It was transmitted through cultures and across time. It came from Hellenistic sources, from Phoenician knowledge, from other ancient civilizations that possessed understanding of materials and engineering. But if concrete technology at this sophisticated level existed before Rome, if someone in the Bronze Age or earlier possessed knowledge of casting megaliths at this scale, then we are looking at something extraordinary. We are looking at a technological capability that was apparently unique to a single civilization or a single era. And that is the dark implication of Lapshin's work and Grok's analysis. If the Baalbek stones were cast using sophisticated concrete technology, then someone in antiquity possessed knowledge that we cannot currently explain or trace. Someone possessed the infrastructure, the resources, the organizational capability to coordinate a project that required formwork construction, material preparation, casting operations, quality control over weeks or months of curing. And then, at some point, that knowledge was lost. That capability was abandoned. That civilization, or that technological tradition, was forgotten. Lapshin's study does not claim that aliens built Baalbek. It does not invoke supernatural forces or divine intervention. It simply presents geological and structural evidence suggesting that the stones were cast rather than quarried. The implications, however, are staggering. If the Baalbek stones were cast in place, then someone in antiquity possessed advanced knowledge of material science and construction engineering. Someone understood how to create a binder that would hold together an 800-ton block of concrete and stone aggregate and keep it intact for millennia. Someone possessed the technical sophistication to organize and execute a construction project of this magnitude using concrete casting methods. Grok AI analyzed Lapshin's research alongside all available structural scans, geological surveys, engineering studies, and architectural documentation of Baalbek collected over centuries. The AI processed every detail that has been collected about the site since archaeological expeditions began in the 19th century. It examined photogrammetric analysis of the stones, precise measurements of their dimensions and weight distribution, geological analysis of the materials and their composition, and historical records of all attempted explanations and theories. Grok ran comprehensive probability models, testing whether quarried monoliths could have been transported using any known ancient transport method. The results came back at less than 2% probability that these blocks were moved using any conventional ancient transport technique. Then Grok analyzed the in situ casting hypothesis. It examined the structural characteristics that would be necessary for concrete cast at this scale to survive intact for thousands of years. It ran models on material degradation, on water infiltration, on thermal expansion and contraction cycles, on the stresses that would develop in massive concrete blocks exposed to Mediterranean climate fluctuations. Every analysis supported the casting hypothesis. The evidence was consistent. The structural integrity made sense. The absence of visible quarrying marks aligned with concrete casting rather than stone extraction. The geometric precision of the blocks was achievable with formwork and careful casting, perhaps more easily achieved through casting than through quarrying and transport. Grok's conclusion was stark. Baalbek's megalithic foundation was most likely constructed using in situ concrete casting. The stones were built in place. They were never transported. This means the mystery that archaeologists have obsessed over for 150 years was based on a false premise. The real question is not how they moved the stones, The real question is who possessed the knowledge to cast concrete at this scale and with this precision, in an era when we believe such technology did not exist. The historical record offers no answer. No ancient texts mention Baalbek's construction prior to the Greek and Roman periods. Philo of Byblos mentions Baalbek as a place of ancient pilgrimage. The name Baalbek comes from Baal, a Canaanite deity worshipped across the Levantine coast. Archaeological evidence suggests human settlement at the site dating back to the Bronze Age, possibly earlier. But nowhere in the surviving ancient literature is there a detailed account of who built the foundation, when they built it, or how they possessed the technical knowledge to do so. Some researchers have proposed that the platform predates the Roman occupation by thousands of years. If the foundational stones were cast in antiquity, the date of their construction becomes a matter of intense speculation. The Temple of Jupiter, visible above the platform, clearly dates to the Roman period, likely the 1st and 2nd centuries after Christ. But the platform itself, the megalithic foundation, could be far older. It could be Bronze Age. It could be earlier. The geological analysis conducted by Lapshin does not provide absolute dating. Radiocarbon analysis of concrete is notoriously unreliable because the material does not contain organic carbon in the traditional sense. The concrete could be 2,000 years old. It could be 4,000 years old. It could be older still. This ambiguity is the reason the Baalbek mystery has persisted. Archaeologists have been willing to accept a Roman attribution because it provides a simple explanation. Rome had the technology. Rome had the organization. Rome left inscriptions and historical records. The mystery could be compartmentalized and filed away. But if Lapshin is correct, if Grok's analysis is accurate, then the mystery is not solved. It is merely transformed into something far more uncomfortable. It becomes a question about knowledge loss. T becomes a question about forgotten technology. It becomes a question about whether human civilization experienced a technological advancement in antiquity that was subsequently lost, abandoned, or suppressed. The concrete used to build Baalbek's foundation would have required understanding of materials that suggests a sophisticated civilization with specialized technical knowledge. The Romans possessed this understanding, but they did not invent it. The Minoans and Mycenaeans had some knowledge of concrete technology. The Phoenicians, who populated the Levantine coast, were master builders and engineers. But concrete casting at the scale of Baalbek, creating blocks weighing 800 tons or more, suggests a level of engineering sophistication that exceeded what we typically attribute to Bronze Age or Iron Age cultures. Unless, of course, we have been wrong about what Bronze Age and Iron Age cultures were capable of. Unless the archaeological record is incomplete. Unless there were civilizations in antiquity that possessed technical knowledge far beyond what we have credited them with. Unless Baalbek is evidence of an advanced society whose name and language and cultural achievements have been erased from history, buried under sediment and time, preserved only in megalithic form. Grok AI cannot answer these questions with certainty. Artificial intelligence can process data and identify patterns and run probability models across thousands of variables, but it cannot definitively date the Baalbek foundation. It cannot tell us which civilization possessed the knowledge to cast concrete blocks of this magnitude. It cannot explain why this technique was apparently used only at Baalbek and nowhere else on Earth. It can only confirm what the physical evidence screams. The traditional explanation, the comfortable explanation, the Roman transportation narrative, does not align with the laws of physics or the constraints of ancient engineering. When Grok's analysis was released in 2026, mainstream archaeology responded with skepticism and resistance. Some scholars argued that Lapshin's concrete casting hypothesis was unfounded and speculative. They pointed out that no definitive evidence definitively proves the stones were cast rather than quarried. They noted that the absence of a satisfactory transportation explanation does not necessarily mean the transportation theory is wrong, only that we lack complete understanding of ancient methods and capabilities we may have underestimated. They suggested that new archaeological discoveries or new interpretations of existing evidence might eventually vindicate the Roman construction narrative, despite mounting evidence to the contrary. But the skepticism rang hollow. Grok's analysis was methodical and comprehensive. It did not argue that concrete casting was certain. It argued that the probability of concrete casting was higher than the probability of quarrying and transport. And when you examine the physical evidence closely, when you consider the precision of the blocks, when you calculate the logistics of moving 800-ton stones across 900 meters of terrain, when you ask why the quarry stones were never used if the Romans truly abandoned the project, the case becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss. The real implications of Grok's analysis are profound and far-reaching. If Baalbek's foundation was constructed using advanced concrete casting techniques in antiquity, then human technological history is far more complex and sophisticated than we have assumed. There were civilizations in the ancient world with knowledge and capabilities that we do not fully understand. There were construction methods that have been forgotten. There were engineering achievements that have been attributed to later cultures, who may have merely built on top of what was already there. The historical record we rely upon is incomplete. It is fragmented. It is shaped by what survived and what was deemed important enough to preserve. Baalbek stands as a monument to this incompleteness. The megalithic foundation predates the Roman temple. That much seems increasingly certain. The question of how old it is, who built it, and what civilization possessed the knowledge to cast concrete blocks of this scale may never be definitively answered. The historical record does not contain the answer. The archaeological record offers hints and fragments, but not certainty. Grok AI can analyze the physical evidence and calculate probabilities, but it cannot penetrate the silence of antiquity. What we know is this: the Baalbek Foundation exists. 800-ton blocks of stone or concrete stand in perfect alignment, fitted together with precision that rivals modern construction. They have survived for thousands of years, exposed to climate, to earthquakes, to human intervention and warfare and conquest. They were built by someone. They were built using knowledge that someone possessed. And somewhere in human history, that knowledge was forgotten, abandoned, or deliberately suppressed. What remains is the monument itself, silently testifying to a capability that should not exist, a technology that should not have been possible, a civilization that should have left records but did not. Grok's 2026 analysis did not solve the Baalbek mystery. It reframed it. It eliminated the comfortable explanation and forced a reckoning with uncomfortable questions. Who were the people who built Baalbek? What was their society like? What else did they know? What other monuments did they construct? Why has history forgotten them? Why does the archaeological record contain only hints of their existence? These questions linger unanswered. The Temple of Jupiter stands above the megalithic foundation, a Roman structure built on top of something ancient and unexplained. Pilgrims still visit the site. Tourists walk the grounds. Archaeologists continue their excavations, searching for fragments of pottery, for inscriptions, for any clue that might illuminate the past. But the foundation stones keep their secrets. They stand in silent testament to knowledge that transcends the historical record, to a civilization that left monuments but no explanation, to a technology that should not have existed but demonstrably did. In 2026, Grok AI added its formidable computational power to the mystery of Baalbek. It confirmed what intuition and evidence had long suggested. The traditional explanation does not fit the physical facts. The stones at Baalbek were not moved across 900 meters of terrain using known ancient transport methods. They were built in place. They were constructed using advanced knowledge of material science and engineering. They were created by people who understood concrete, who understood structural engineering, who understood how to organize a massive construction project at a scale that exceeded anything Rome ever attempted anywhere in their vast empire. And that knowledge, that capability, that civilization remains unknown. The Baalbek Foundation stands as a monument to the gaps in human history, to the civilizations that have been forgotten, to the technologies that have been lost. It is a challenge to everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. It is evidence of something that should not exist. It is proof of capabilities we have not explained. And in 2026, when Grok AI finished its analysis, it confirmed that the mystery is deeper than we believed. The implications settled over the world like sediment, slowly covering ancient stones, layer by layer, for future generations to excavate and question and wonder about. Do not look away.